All right, let's jump right in today. Ever heard of an empire that went toe-to-toe with Rome for centuries? An empire that actually forced the mighty Roman legions to change their tactics.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. We're talking about the Parthians.
The Parthians.
A real power in the ancient world. They built an empire that rivaled Rome. I mean, in power and how long it lasted.
Wow.
But they're largely forgotten.
Forgotten.
Yeah.
So why are they forgotten?
Well, part of it is that their story is mainly told by their enemies. Think about it. The Romans, the Greeks.
History is written by the victors, right?
Exactly. So we have to be careful. We got to read between the lines, think critically about these accounts.
Yeah, it's like trying to solve a puzzle. You've got some pieces, but they might be a little bit warped.
That's a great way to put it. We're piecing together a story from fragments.
Yeah.
And a lot of those fragments, well, they come from people who didn't exactly like the Parthians.
Okay, so where do we even begin with the Parthians?
Well, we start with their origins. See, they didn't just appear out of nowhere. They emerged from the collapse of, Alexander the Great's empire.
Oh, right, that massive empire.
Exactly. And from that collapse, you had the Seleucid Empire rise, a huge Hellenistic kingdom. It sprawled across Persia and Mesopotamia.
Okay, I'm vaguely familiar with the Seleucids.
The Parthians, initially, they were a nomadic group, lived on the edges of, Seleucid territory. But they weren't content to stay in the shadows. Not for long.
So how did they go from nomadic people to taking on an empire?
Well, it's a classic case of opportunity meeting preparedness.
Okay.
You see, the Seleucids, they were strong, but they were always fighting, always fighting with rivals. The Ptolemies down in Egypt, the Antigonids over in Greece.
So their attention was divided.
Exactly. And that gave groups like the Parthians, it gave them a chance.
To make their move.
Yeah, to assert themselves.
So the Parthians, they weren't just strong. They were smart.
Right. They saw those weaknesses, and they knew how to exploit them, knew when to strike.
Yeah, they were playing the long game, it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely. They started small, chipping away at the edges of the Seleucid Empire, slowly expanding their own territory.
And as they conquered, did they just impose their rule?
No, that's what's fascinating. They were really clever about it. They incorporated the local populations. They used the existing power structures,
So they didn't just conquer, they assimilated.
Exactly. That's how they became the king of kings.
It wasn't just about brute force. It was about understanding how to rule.
Yeah, they got it. They weren't just conquerors. They were administrators. They were diplomats. They knew how to keep power, how to get the support of their people.
That's a lesson for any leader, even today. But, it wasn't all easy, right?
Yeah.
They must have faced, pushback.
Oh, of course. No empire is built without challenges. The Seleucids, they tried to get their land back. One of their kings, Antiochus III, he actually pushed the Parthians back for a bit.
Things were looking bad.
Yeah, for a time. But then a little bit of luck.
Luck? What do you mean?
Well, the Seleucids, they got distracted again. Another conflict. It seems like that was their weakness.
They couldn't stay focused.
Antiochus III, he turned his attention to the Ptolemies in Egypt. And that gave the Parthians a break.
They needed to catch their breath.
Yeah. They regrouped. They launched a counteroffensive, a decisive victory over the Seleucids. They solidified their hold on those former Seleucid territories.
Wow. So they were really good at playing the long game, biding their time, seizing opportunities.
Yeah, very strategic, always thinking ahead.
Okay, so now we have the Parthians. They're a major power.
Right.
We've got Babylon, Seleucia, these major cities. And then a new power shows up in the West.
Yeah, and this is where things get really interesting.
The Romans.
The Romans. You've got these two empires, at the top of their game. Both want to expand, and now their paths are going to collide.
It's like a clash of titans.
It is. But here's the thing. They actually spent more time at peace than at war.
Really?
Yeah.
I always picture them, constantly fighting.
It was more of a complex relationship.
Okay.
The Euphrates River. It became the sort of the dividing line between them.
Like a border.
Yeah. Roman influence on one side, Parthian on the other.
But I bet it wasn't, a neat line.
No, it was porous. Lots of back and forth. Power plays, proxy wars. Both empires, they were trying to pull strings,
Yeah.
making alliances with smaller kingdoms.
So it's not just Rome versus Parthia.
It's a whole web of alliances and rivalries.
Got it. Like a big game of Risk.
Exactly. And one of the key players in that game, Armenia, always being pulled between Rome and Parthia.
So how did the Parthians see the Romans? I mean, were they intimidated?
It's hard to say for sure. Our sources, they're mostly Roman, but there's a story, Plutarch tells it, about a Parthian envoy. He meets with the Roman general, Sulla. And Sulla, he intentionally positions himself, to show he's in charge. He's got the envoy on one side, the king of Cappadocia on the other.
He's showing off his power.
Yeah, and you know what? The Parthian king, he had that envoy executed.
For that.
He saw it as an insult.
Wow. So the Parthians, they had pride.
A lot of pride. They weren't going to be treated as inferior. Not to Sulla, not to anyone.
That's pretty powerful.
It shows you they weren't just reacting to Rome. They were shaping events, asserting themselves.
They were a force to be reckoned with. And that brings us to their military, right? Their cavalry, those Parthian horse archers. Legendary.
Oh, absolutely. Central to who they were, a big part of their success. And their cavalry, especially the horse archers, a force to be reckoned with.
So picture this. You're a Roman soldier, used to fighting, face to face, and suddenly you've got these Parthian horse archers zooming around, raining arrows down on you.
It was a whole different kind of warfare.
And they had that famous Parthian shot, right?
Yeah, the Parthian shot. Brilliant tactic. They
Okay.
pretend to retreat, draw the enemy in.
Oh, so you think they're running away?
Exactly. And then at the last second, they turn in their saddles, loose a volley of arrows. Deadly accurate.
Wow. I can see why the Romans had trouble with that.
It baffled them. They were used to, a more straightforward fight. The Parthians, they were unpredictable.
Yeah, that'd be terrifying to face.
It was effective. The Romans, they eventually adapted, but the Parthians, they forced them to change, to rethink how they fought wars.
That's amazing.
They had to, and that says a lot about the Parthians and their military ingenuity.
It shows that sometimes it's not about brute force. It's about strategy.
Absolutely. Outsmarting your opponent. And the Parthians, they were masters of that.
The underdog.
Yeah, the underdog. And they thrived for centuries. They survived because they were smart, they were adaptable. And their story, it really challenges the way we usually think about the ancient world. It does. It forces us to look beyond those traditional accounts, to see things from a different perspective.
And that's what we're all about here.
Exactly. The Parthians, they remind us that there's always another side to the story.
And sometimes that other side is full of surprises.
Oh, yeah. Military ingenuity, cultural resilience. They were the real deal.
Okay, so we've got the Parthians. They're powerful. They've got this amazing military. But they're more than just warriors, right?
Right. They were key players in a huge network of trade and cultural exchange.
Because of their location.
Exactly. Right in the middle of everything, connecting the Roman Empire in the West with civilizations all the way to China.
Wow, China.
They were a bridge between East and West.
So even back then, the world was connected.
More than we might think. Think of it. Caravans, laden with silk, spices, amber, all passing through Parthian territory.
It's like something out of a movie.
It was a bustling, vibrant world. And we even have accounts from the Chinese. They talk about meeting Parthian envoys, marveling at their horsemanship.
So the Parthians, they were making an impression all the way to China.
Their influence, it stretched far and wide, from Rome to the east.
That's incredible
Okay.
to think about how they shaped the ancient world.
They were a driving force in the exchange of ideas, innovations.
It's mind-blowing to think about their role in history.
Their story reminds us that even back then, the world was complex, interconnected. And the Parthians, they're right at the center of it all.
Yeah, it really makes you realize that the ancient world wasn't so isolated after all.
Yeah.
But, we've talked a lot about empires and battles and trade.
Yeah.
What about the everyday Parthians? Like, what was it like to live in the Parthian Empire?
Yeah, what was daily life like? Did they have bustling cities? Art, traditions? What about their society beyond the military stuff?
I think that's a great question. What do we know about their culture?
Well, that's where things get a little tricky. We don't have as much information. We have to rely on archaeology, bits of inscriptions, accounts from outsiders. It's like putting together a puzzle with only a few pieces.
Okay.
But we can learn some things. One thing that really stands out, they were remarkably tolerant. of different cultures and religions.
All right. Really?
Yeah, I mean, their empire was incredibly diverse, all sorts of people, different customs, different beliefs.
So they weren't trying to, force everyone to be the same.
No, not at all. They seemed to get it. They understood that unity didn't require, uniformity. People could practice their own religions, speak their own languages, govern themselves to a degree.
As long as they, paid their taxes.
Exactly, as long as they acknowledged the Knesset of the Parthian king of kings as the top dog.
Yeah. Makes sense. A pragmatic approach.
Very pragmatic and
Yeah.
effective. But don't get me wrong, this tolerance, it had limits.
Oh, I bet.
Anyone who challenged their authority, well, they dealt with that swiftly and decisively.
Yeah, I remember that story about the envoy
Yeah.
executed for that perceived insult.
Right. They weren't afraid to use force when they had to.
So it was a balance.
Uh-huh.
Tolerance, but also control.
Exactly. Keep people happy, but also maintain order. It's a tricky thing. And they managed to pull it off for over 400 years.
Wow. 400 years. That's a long time for an empire to last.
It is. It's impressive. But it makes you wonder, why don't we hear more about them? Why are they so often overshadowed by Rome and Persia?
It's true. They don't get the same attention.
It's a good question. Maybe because their story is often told by others, or maybe because, well, we just don't have as much information about them.
Yeah.
But their legacy is still there. They left their mark on the world.
So what are the big takeaways from the Parthians? What should we remember about them? Why is their story important today?
Well, I think first and foremost, their resilience, their adaptability.
Right?
They started as nomads, became empire builders, took on the Seleucids, stood up to Rome. They were always evolving.
Always changing to survive.
Yeah, exactly. That's a valuable lesson, I think.
Being able to adapt is crucial.
And their military, we can't forget that. The Parthians shot, their cavalry, they were innovative.
They forced the Romans to change.
They did. Sometimes the underdog, they come up with the most brilliant strategies.
Because they have to.
Right. And lastly, I think their tolerance, it's something we can learn from. The world today, it's so interconnected, but also divided.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
The Parthians, they showed that you can have unity and diversity.
It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Exactly. You can have different cultures, different beliefs, and still be part of something bigger.
That's a powerful message.
It is. And it's a message that, well, it still resonates today.
So where do we go from here? What are the big mysteries you're still thinking about when it comes to the Parthians?
That's a good question. The biggest one, I think, is what did they think about all of this? What were their motivations, their hopes, their fears? We see bits and pieces of their culture, their art, but their own voice, their own perspective, it's still somewhat of a mystery.
It's like we're missing part of the story.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what makes them so intriguing. They force us to question our assumptions, to realize that we don't know everything.
And that there's always more to discover.
Always. And who knows what we'll find out next. As archaeologists keep digging, historians keep researching, the Parthians, they still have secrets to reveal.
Yeah, I'm definitely feeling inspired to learn more.
Me too. It's a journey of discovery.
It is. But for now, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about.
I hope so. And maybe, just maybe, we've sparked their curiosity, inspired them to do their own deep dive into the Parthian Empire.
Yeah. Because the Parthians, they're more than just a footnote in history.
They are. They're a reminder that history is full of surprises and that the underdog, well, sometimes the underdog has the best story to tell.
Absolutely. And on that note, I want to encourage all our listeners to keep exploring, keep questioning, keep digging into the past.
It's out there waiting to be discovered.
And you never know what you might find. So until next time, keep on learning.
Yeah, it's amazing how they blended all those different influences, created something really unique. And, makes me think about their cities. What were those like?
Oh, they were vibrant, real centers of activity. Think about Ctesiphon, their capital.
Ctesiphon, okay.
It was a marvel, architecturally, I mean. You had Hellenistic influences, Persian, Mesopotamian, all blended
A
together.
real mix. Yeah, imagine palaces, marketplaces, huge public buildings, all decorated with carvings, mosaics. It was quite a sight, I'm sure.
It sounds incredible, a real testament to their skill. But what about their society? Was it very rigid, Or was there, some room for people to move up in the world?
Well, it was hierarchical, for sure. You had the elite, the nobility, the commoners, but there is evidence that social mobility wasn't impossible.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like skilled people, merchants, artisans, they could rise if they were talented, if they contributed to society.
So there was a chance to improve your lot in life, even back then.
It seems so. And I think the Parthians, they recognized talent, they rewarded it, and that probably helped them flourish.
Makes sense. So we've talked about a lot: their military, their diplomacy, their tolerance, their trade networks, their cities. It's clear they were remarkable people. But if you had to, sum it all up, what would you say? What are their most significant contributions to history?
Hmm. Well, I think their story is a reminder. History isn't always, straightforward.
Right. It's not just a line from point A to point B.
Exactly. The Parthians, they defied expectations. They challenged the established order. They adapted, they innovated, they blended cultures, and they left a lasting legacy.
They were the ultimate underdogs,
Mm.
and they made it work. They thrived.
They did. They really did. And their story, it's a testament to human ingenuity, to
Right.
our ability to overcome challenges, and to the fact that a good underdog story, well, it never gets old.
Absolutely. The Parthians, they may be gone, but their story, it's still relevant.
It is. It reminds us that there's always more to discover, always another side to the story.
And that's what makes history so fascinating.
It really is. There's always something new to learn, always a different perspective to consider.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dives into the world of the Parthians. It's been a pleasure. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. Don't be afraid to dig deeper, to question what you think you know, to look for those hidden stories, those underdogs, because they often have the most to teach us.
I completely agree. The Parthians, they're a perfect example of that.
They are. So until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those minds open.